Phillip Schofield has said he's lost everything and apologised to the former colleague with whom he had an affair. The former host of This Morning was speaking for the first time since resigning from ITV last week. In an interview with the BBC, Schofield said he'd been having suicidal thoughts since leaving his job and that he believed homophobia had been a factor in the reaction to the relationship.
If it was a heterosexual relationship, then, it would have been a bit of nudge, nudge, wink, wink. If it's a gay relationship, then suddenly it raises eyebrows. It's wrong. It's wrong. People do find each other attractive in different age groups. I mean, it does happen.
They are then allowed to turn up the next day advocating the use of drink or something else, I don't know, and sit on a couch. I'm so drunk, I haven't been to bed. Oh, I haven't been to bed either, I'm drunk, whatever. And yet, ITV, this is at a time with a legacy of Ant McPartland, lovely fella, who was in a driving accident where people were injured and he was under the influence of drink. And yet they can promote that.
I'm not that bad, I'm okay, and the person that I am on screen I think is very much the same as the person that I am out on the street.
And then, in my dressing room one day, something happened.
Phillip Schofield used to be one of those TV faces you didn't even question, and honestly, this video exists because one of you brought him up in the comments under my last video. Someone asked why nobody ever really talks about Phillip Schofield the way they talk about other media figures who fall from grace. So I went back, looked at the timeline properly, and the more I dug, the clearer it became that this story is way bigger and way darker than most people realize. Because Phillip wasn't just another presenter, he was the presenter. For decades, he was the definition of safe television, the kind of guy broadcasters build entire schedules around. Parents trusted him. Brands trusted him. ITV treated him like royalty. For years, Phillip Schofield wasn't just successful, he was untouchable. Which is exactly why his downfall hit so hard. Because when you actually trace what happened, this wasn't a sudden scandal or a freak accident. It was a slow collapse caused by secrets, lies, and a media machine that looked the other way for far too long. Phillip didn't start out as a powerhouse. His career began back in the 1980s on children's television, most famously on the BBC's Broom Cupboard. He had that easy, likable presence that worked perfectly for kids' TV. Friendly, quick-witted, never intimidating. Through the 90s and early 2000s, he bounced around British television, hosting game shows, live broadcasts, and weekend programs. But everything changed when he landed on This Morning. That show turned Phillip into a brand. Alongside Holly Willoughby, he became the face of daytime TV. They were marketed as close friends, almost family. Viewers didn't just watch them, they trusted them. And ITV leaned into that image hard. Phillip wasn't just hosting, he was everywhere. Awards shows, specials, charity events. If ITV needed someone dependable, Phillip was the first call. For years, nothing stuck to him. Then, in February 2020, Phillip came out publicly as gay.
So anyway, he comes into our dressing room and he falls down on his knees. I mean, the acting is amazing. He falls down on his knees crying. And I said to him, what's the matter? What's the matter? I'm gay. I'm gay. And I walked over and I said, is that all? Well, what is this? What is? I thought he'd killed a child or something. And I stood him up, I pulled him up, and I said, what are you talking about? So you're gay? And that tied into a lot of things that, you may have heard, and I think anybody to be imprisoned in a life that isn't true to them would be totally wrong.
Yeah.
And we were very supportive, and Ruth hugged him, and we said, look, we'll stand by you, it's all okay. I mean,
after nearly 3 decades of marriage and 2 daughters, he released a statement explaining that he had lived much of his life confused about his sexuality. The announcement was followed by an emotional segment on This Morning, framed as brave and deeply personal. The public response was overwhelmingly supportive. Behind the praise and applause, old rumors began resurfacing. Not loud enough to trend, but persistent enough to worry people inside the industry. Whispers that Phillip's private life wasn't just complicated, but deeply inappropriate. At the center of those rumors was a much younger man who had worked on This Morning. The issue wasn't simply that Phillip had a relationship with a colleague, it was the timeline, the age gap, and the power imbalance that came with being one of the most influential figures in British television. The man in question, Matthew McGreevy, was more than 30 years younger than Phillip. Phillip reportedly helped him get work experience on This Morning when Matthew was just 18. On its own, that might not raise alarms, but internet investigators later found evidence suggesting Phillip had known Matthew for years before that, through a local theatre group Matthew attended as a child.
1 million followers! Woo! Hello, Phillip. How are you? I'm good.
That detail changed everything, because suddenly, this wasn't just a workplace relationship. It raised serious questions about access, grooming, and how long boundaries may have been crossed before anyone outside the building noticed. Former staff members later claimed it was an open secret on set. People knew, people whispered, but nothing ever made it into print. Old footage began circulating online. One clip in particular made people uneasy. A dinner celebration where Phillip is seated. At the time, no one questioned it. Years later, people couldn't unsee it. And still, silence. Stories vanished. Posts were deleted. Allegations never gained traction. There were claims, never officially confirmed, that Phillip had crisis PR teams monitoring online discussion and that certain stories simply couldn't be reported. Whether or not formal legal tools were used, the effect was obvious. Nothing stuck. Then, in 2021, another crack appeared. A young TikTok creator claimed Phillip had been messaging him privately since he was 17. The creator insisted the messages were platonic, but the optics were troubling. Why was one of the most powerful men in daytime television privately messaging teenagers? Once again, nothing happened publicly, but pressure was building behind the scenes, and by 2023, everything unraveled.
And so he worked at the show for a bit. We became mates. And then one day, something happened that just changed it.
There were accusations that you groomed him. I was going to let you answer the question.
I did not. I did not. There is no question I did a bad thing. Unprofessional. First time. I know I did that.
Yeah.
The last time we had a conversation was when I texted Holly and said, don't reply. This is after the statement last week. Don't reply. You're probably not allowed to. But I am deeply, deeply sorry that I lied to you.
That admission ended everything. His talent agency dropped him within hours. ITV cut ties. Holly Willoughby released a statement saying she had asked him directly about the rumours years earlier and had been lied to. The image collapsed overnight, but stepping down wasn't the end of the story. It was just the beginning of the fallout. Because once Phillip Schofield fell, people started asking the questions that should have been asked years earlier, about power, about protection, and about how long this behaviour was quietly tolerated by the industry around him. And that's where things get even darker. Once Phillip admitted the relationship and resigned from ITV, the public conversation shifted fast. It stopped being about one man making bad personal choices and started becoming about how an entire system allowed those choices to go unchecked for years. Because here's the uncomfortable truth. Phillip Schofield didn't operate in a vacuum. For someone at his level, nothing happens without layers of people knowing. Producers, executives, HR departments, legal teams, all of them orbiting the same ecosystem. And the more people looked at the timeline, the harder it became to believe that ITV genuinely had no idea what was going on. ITV later claimed they investigated rumours back in 2020 and found no evidence because both parties denied the relationship. On paper, that sounds reasonable. In reality, it raises even more questions. When allegations involve a massive power imbalance, simply asking the two people involved and taking their word for it isn't due diligence, it's box ticking. Especially when one of those people controls careers. Former colleagues and industry figures started speaking more openly once Phillip was gone. Broadcasters who had worked alongside him suggested that senior management protected him because he delivered ratings, that he was too valuable to challenge, that confronting him would have meant risking one of ITV's most profitable daytime brands. And this isn't new. British television has a long history of circling the wagons around its stars. From reality shows to talk shows, the pattern repeats itself. Complaints get minimised, rumours get buried, and whistleblowers quietly disappear while the brand keeps running. Phillip was the perfect example of that system working exactly as designed. When Holly Willoughby finally broke her silence, her statement carried more weight than anything ITV had said. She admitted she'd been lied to directly, that she felt hurt, betrayed, and that alone shattered the carefully maintained image of unity that This Morning had sold to viewers for over a decade. Suddenly, the TV family narrative collapsed. Then came the follow-up statements from Phillip himself, and they only made things worse. Instead of fully owning the damage, he framed himself as a victim of speculation, claiming that only a small group of people with grudges were fueling the backlash. He insisted the workplace was never toxic, that This Morning was a wonderful environment. But that defense misses the point. If you're the person holding the power, you don't always see the toxicity, because you're not the one affected by it. When boundaries are crossed quietly and careers depend on staying silent, the absence of complaints doesn't equal the absence of harm. That's what made this story resonate far beyond Phillip himself. People weren't just angry at him, they were angry at the culture that allowed a respected public figure to blur professional boundaries while being shielded by reputation and influence. And once that door opened, everything connected. His brother's conviction, the delayed reporting, the secrecy, the sudden exit, the years of rumors dismissed as gossip. All of it painted a picture that was impossible to ignore. What ultimately ended Phillip's career wasn't the relationship itself. It was the lies, the repeated denials, the manipulation of trust, the fact that he continued to sit on national television, dispensing advice and moral guidance, while hiding truths that directly contradicted the image he sold to the public.
He is the chief narcissist. He is a complete and uttered, dyed-in-the-wool narcissist. Everything is about him. Why were there no changes? Why was there no retribution? Because of the management around him, the people who tolerated these things that went on. And when there was talk of Phillip having a relationship with a young man, that young man was, in inverted commas, promoted. I didn't know, but I've subsequently found out from a very, very good source, because he would arrive much earlier in the morning than I would for the programme, that he was delivered from Phillip's London home, usually on a Friday morning, because Thursday was playtime when he and Phillip would hit the town. And then he obviously stayed overnight, and there are records to show that he was brought in the next day separately.
In cars paid for by ITV?
In cars paid for by ITV.
So the management would have had to have known about that, wouldn't they?
Unless Phillip paid the bill separately, but it would still have to go through the accounts office that they would have seen that and known that.
Right.
Yes, it's a total cover-up. It's a total cover-up. Those in authority had to know. They had to know what was going on, and they thought they would dodge a bullet with this, which they do, and they do constantly. All I'm here to do is to speak for people who hadn't got a voice, people who were gagged either legally or by actions that were taken within the production team. And I'm speaking up on behalf of them. This nonsense that he wrote today about toxicity, about it's the happy place and whatever. Holy God, what planet does this man live on? He created an atmosphere where people hated him. The people would avoid him in the corridor. He didn't look at anybody, didn't know anybody's name. Holly doesn't know people's names either. This is legendary within the production team,
Yes, it is.
that how distant they are.
That hypocrisy is what audiences don't forgive, and that's why his fall felt so final. Since leaving ITV, Phillip has effectively vanished from mainstream television. No comeback tour, no slow rebrand, no carefully managed redemption arc, just silence. Broken only by the occasional interview that feels more defensive than reflective. And maybe that silence is intentional, because unlike many fallen celebrities, Phillip's story doesn't lend itself easily to reinvention. It's not a one-off mistake. It's not a misunderstanding. It's a long pattern of behavior enabled by power, wrapped in a public persona built on trust. What makes this story linger isn't shock, it's disappointment. People grew up with Phillip on their screens. They invited him into their homes every morning. They believed in the version of him television sold. And discovering that version was curated, protected, and dishonest feels personal to a lot of viewers. So when people ask whether Phillip Schofield was cancelled, that misses the point. This wasn't cancellation, it was consequence. The consequence of unchecked influence, of silence being rewarded, of truth being delayed until it could no longer be contained. And the reason this story still matters isn't because Phillip fell, it's because the system that lifted him up is still very much alive. Which means the real question isn't whether this will happen again, it's who it's happening to right now, and then how long it will take before the curtain finally drops. So what do you think about all of this? Was Phillip Schofield protected for years because he was simply too valuable to the network? Or do you think the situation spiraled further than it ever should have? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. I really do read them, and this video actually came from one of your suggestions. If you enjoyed this breakdown, make sure to like, share, and subscribe for more deep dives into influencer and media industry drama, power abuse behind the scenes, and the stories that don't get talked about enough. This story might be over on TV, but online it's far from finished, and the next one is already lining up. I'll see you in the next video.